Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar video. This is going to be my next The Legacy of Yangchen chapter analysis video, and this one will be for chapter 3, Among Friends. Just before we jump into this, I do want to mention that I do have YouTube channel membership enabled on my channel. If anyone out there does want to help support the channel, and especially support this very long every chapter gets a video series on the channel. 2 tiers available. At both tiers you do get the loyalty badges and custom emojis. At the higher tier you'll also gain access to some exclusive videos on the channel, but that is just to highlight ways that you can support the channel. It is very much appreciated, but of course not required. But yeah, let's get into this. Of course, I'm releasing this on the day the book actually comes out, so happy release date for the novel, everyone. And we'll jump in here. So chapter 3, Among Friends. I think this is a very good chapter. I think straight away I want to make that very, very clear. What's cool and unique about this chapter is that it is basically just a meeting between Avatar Yangchen and High Chieftain Oyaluk from the Water Tribes, of course. You know, technically, I suppose, Northern Water Tribe Chief, but of course we know that because of the events of Korra Book 2, the Southern Water Tribe is only like truly independent at that point. So technically Oyaluk is the chief of both tribes. But anyway, we know that. So let's jump in here. So we're obviously in Agna Kel-A here, meaning Yangchen has made her way from Bin-Er to the Northern Water Tribe, which actually isn't that much of a journey because, of course, Bin-Er is incredibly northern as an Earth Kingdom city. So you think it's a whole different kind of, like, she's just traveled like halfway across the world, but actually no, that's kind of the whole point, is that like Kavik is from the Northern Water Tribe and they came down here. It's kind of like the first point of contact with the Earth Kingdom. So that's a nice detail, of course. But anyway, she notes that, you know, nowadays she comes to visit the chief on like more important matters, official meetings between Avatar and a world leader. Whereas because Oyaluk has been the only chief during her reign as Avatar, she has memories of course, going to meet him when she was much younger, and the meetings were purely these kind of more kind of fun kind of situations. It was just like the honorable meeting here, and there was no real business being discussed. But now Yangchen has to kind of face him, addressing a lot of business with the fate of the world kind of at play here. So very, very interesting kind of stuff there. So we just get the idea that Oyaluk has been wanting to kind of directly talk to Yangchen for a while now, but she has made it clear no direct talking about business until after the tables are cleared and we're alone. And as we kind of go through this kind of whole idea, you really see the idea that Yangchen is just like, no, not now. Everyone else needs to be gone. No, not yet. Completely gone. Then we will start talking. There are some nice details here, like we get the kind of whole performance kind of aspect here. A solo performance from the Grand Master of Agna Kel-A, Sifu Akuak, that is A-K-O-A-K, who is described as being a kind of young kind of Sifu, I suppose, main master waterbender in the tribe. Does the kind of performance thing, weaving water in and out between them. There's a nice little detail here where Yangchen actually kind of plays a part in it and puts her own little kind of twist on it, like Air Nomad sense of humor they kind of add in here. But after this, finally they do get down to business. So they are left in the room alone. It is even noted that the Thin Claws, his kind of private guard, leave as well. Now we know about them from the end of the first book, of course. They tried to basically capture or take out Kavik. We don't fully know for sure because of what happened. But obviously speaks to the idea of like, this is our first time getting to meet either Oyaluk or Gonryu. And our first impression of him is, of course, that we know from the first book, one of the main guys involved in making kind of the Platinum Affair what it was, but then also nearly taking out Kavik in a quest to gain information on what happened in Bin Ur. So we maybe don't have the best sense of this character heading in here. But as we see, he is actually quite reasonable ultimately. So that's quite interesting. Now, it is noted that to keep the meeting private, Yangchen basically makes a kind of small kind of tornado basically in the room, and they have their conversation effectively in the eye of this tornado. So she is putting in like extra double layers of security here to make sure that none of what they talk about gets kind of leaked out there, that the tornado will mask noise kind of going out, kind of coming in, but they will be able to hear each other. That's the kind of whole idea here. So, when they get down to business finally, Oiluk immediately notes kind of what Yangchen's already been talking about. That like, oh, you used to come here when you were so young, you used to play with my kind of like nieces and nephews, but now you come here kind of like in the more official kind of capacity. But he knows, he makes a little bit of a jab here of just like, but now that you've come into your power, I thought you'd be fairer in your attentions, not another Zito. So this is Oiluk addressing the fact that Zito seemed quite Fire Nation focused as an avatar, and perhaps did he help the other nations as much, or like did he super favor the Fire Nation above everyone else? It especially notable because of course he literally took on a role within the Fire Nation government, like a job in the Fire Nation government. So these accusations are of course going to be leveled at Zito here. But Yangchen is just like, I'm not biased, I don't favor a nation. He of course counters with the idea of, but like, you basically run Bin Ur, you spend like half of your time in the Earth Kingdom making money for Earth King Feishan. In many ways you work almost directly for him, like, what am I meant to kind of view that as? And she just in her head is kind of like, it's correct. He is completely correct to note this, but I'm not the only one guilty of stuff like this, because she points out here, I'm catching knives that you and Fire Lord Gonryu dropped. Have you forgotten? You two started, you two caused the Platinum Affair in the first place. And so again, it's just like Yangchen being very blunt about this, of just like, yeah, the reason I have to do this is because like there's no one else to kind of do this. Like the Shang cities exist because of you basically, and I'm trying to make something of them. And he does say, an act I regret every day, like taking part in what actually happened there. And we get a little recap, of course, of the Platinum Affair here. I'm not going to particularly go over it because I think we're all familiar with the main plot dynamics of the Platinum Affair. Just again mentioning the whole idea of they supported General Nong over Feishan in the rebellion that was happening in the Earth Kingdom at the time. So again, it's the whole idea of this was an internal Earth Kingdom matter that the other nations decided to try and influence, and that is ultimately what caused the issues here. That's the whole dynamic that we're addressing here. And I like that she points out, it's not directly to him, but it's noted here that like they chose to make that decision while she was still exceptionally young as the Avatar and unable to play a role in what happened. Because it was like 8 years ago, it was described in the first book, this happened. So Yangchen would have only been like 9. She couldn't possibly have done anything to avert this. And in a way, she's kind of thinking in her head, did you purposefully do that? And she also thinks about the idea, we've already referenced a few times now, her kind of going to meet with him under friendlier circumstances when she was younger. That there must have been an incident where she met with him, and then like days after meeting, he made the decision to do what he did during the Platinum Affair. So that's the kind of whole big idea here. Now, she does note about Oiluk, he was a reasonable man, a competent leader, decent at his core. So from Yangchen, I think that is relatively high praise. So the criticisms I think we have of him, it should be an element of nuance coming into play, kind of highlighting that it's not that Gonryu and Oiluk are like disastrous leaders or anything like that. In general, they are solid, and as we'll learn, it's not entirely, you know, the whole idea of it was them purely acting on their own. We'll get into that as the kind of chapter goes on. So yeah, obviously it was a failure, of course, even though they viewed, like, you know, she views it as, I guess, Nong, like those two, was a more reasonable person than Fei Shan, so maybe that's the logic he used to actually support him over Fei Shan. But of course, once it was discovered that there was actually official assistance from other nations in this rebellion, this is what caused the Platinum Affair. And he says, and he just is quite open about this, trading Fei Shan for Nong seemed brilliant at the time. Dare I say it, it was a move in the nature of your predecessor, Avatar Zito, who manipulated the downfall of corrupt officials and the promotion of their better replacements as a matter of course. And the next line in the book is kind of interesting, because it's the only mention of Salai in the book, but it's not particularly insightful. It's just Salai shoes. The Earth King was not a provincial tax collector, and none of them were Avatar Zito. And it's just meant to be a kind of exclamation, effectively. Salai's shoes, I can't believe you just said that, type of thing. That, like, you are trying to literally, like, compare yourself, who you viewed as being the better world leader, like, you know, in a way, like, what gives you the right to really kind of think that way, kind of playing with politics like that. That's the whole kind of issue here, that they feel they can play these politics. And then the idea that, you know, they're trying to compare themselves to the actually truly respected Avatar Zito, when look at the mess they actually caused, like trying to kind of explain away kind of his blunder in a way. It's definitely interesting. So she notes, you know, it's entirely possible to outsmart yourself. You know, I've done it in many a lifetime. So she just notes that. But then what's said next is very interesting. Oiluk says, it wasn't even my idea to begin with, he confessed. So he says, my most senior advisors informed me over a game of Pai Shou that Fire Lord Ganryu was inclined to throw his influence behind Nong, and convinced me to do the same. They believed the two of us acting in concert would guarantee the plan's success. My representatives brokered the deal with Ganryu behind the curtains. And Yangchen is kind of like, wait, over a game of, like, Pai Shou, like, it's connecting in her heads here that, like, what does this mean? Like, and initially when you first read through this, you're kind of like, oh, they played the game of world politics, like literally deciding to effectively attempt to oust one of the world leaders. And it was casually done over the game of Pai Shou with just the, like, advice from these random people. Like, you know, it kind of speaks to the idea of, like, oh, well, there's a kind of truth that we didn't quite know. I think when we maybe considered the Platinum Affair, it was more of all of these leaders are forces of will to themselves. And so they all strategize to come to this conclusion, when it very much seems to come across as if it was similar people on both sides, with the Fire Lord and the Water Tribe Chief, influencing them to make the same decision. And then you add an extra layer on top of that, which we're going to get into in a second, of just what notable organization is known for playing Pai Shou and being in surprisingly high positions. It's the Order of the White Lotus. Now, this is one of those ones where, like, the book, I don't think ever directly just comes out and tells you that it was the Order of the White Lotus. They effectively orchestrated the Platinum Affair. But it's kind of heavily implied in the book that we might not be able to, like, confirm it with evidence, but it seems to be the case that this is what happened. Based on something Ayunarak says about her own opinions about General Dong, it very much seems like the White Lotus is in agreement with the decision that was actually made here. But we'll get to other stuff with the Order of the White Lotus in a second here, which is kind of part of why the connection comes up in a way. Like this, immediately followed by a more direct reference to Owl, of course. So yeah, she notes here that it meant that neither head of state had come up with the plan to topple the Earth King. The folly had been cooked up by nameless men and women with contacts spanning the borders of the four nations. Figures in the background who thought grand strategy could be reduced to tile positions and numbers, who would probably never face accountability for being mistaken. And I think, based on the way the White Lotus is presented in the previous book and this one, that feels like the Order of the White Lotus in this era. That fits them perfectly. And it says it here, yeah, the origins of the Platinum Affair had the finger smudges of the White Lotus all over it. This is why she didn't trust the organization. So it feels like it's like all but confirmed. That, as ever, they are good at hiding their tracks, but there are smudges there that seem to basically confirm it. That's the whole idea here. And she kind of comes to the conclusion, okay, there is a way, Oyaluk, for you to make amends, and that is, at the conference coming up, they're kind of addressing this, the big conference coming up in Taku, where all the Zongdus and all of the heads of state are going to come face to face. You can make a kind of attempt to end the Platinum Affair here. That, in my experience, interacting with Earth King Faishan, he is happier these days, he's richer, that helps too, and if there was any time for you to make an overture to him to try and officially end what is happening in the world and fix relationships between the nations, now is the time to act in good faith. That's the kind of whole idea here. She wants to finally make a move to end the Platinum Affair. But will he do it? He seems remorseful over what's happened. But as we'll see here, he gets down to kind of like business and the kind of realistic, rational decisions that seem to need to be made in all of these situations, of course. And she notes, and I think her efforts to try and convince people is really good, because she has that kind of air nomad wisdom to her. The idea, we don't need to leave our mistakes uncorrected. We don't have to accept the ills of the world simply because they've lasted. And I will help you. I will help all of you. I'll help the world. We can get through this. And we know that this is true. She can make things happen. She will put all of her effort in to make this happen. It just needs him to say yes, have a little hope, have a little faith. But he says it won't work. You will never get Faishan to swallow his pride. If you think he's in a better mood these days, he's lying. He wants retribution. And he's basically like, my advisors kind of are telling me kind of the reverse, effectively. And that's the kind of whole idea here. My advisors tell me that in the last few weeks, Faishan has been extremely agitated by a new piece of intelligence he's gained. Against all reason, he now believes the Fire Lord and I are responsible for the destruction in Bin-Ur, as if we deployed some kind of weapon against him. And this is where they do a full chapter cut, because, of course, this is like Yangchen kind of being told. He now seems to have more direct evidence to suggest it is an actual weapon and that she has lied. So this is a kind of hammer blow of a statement by Oyaluk here. And it says here, as we open up the next kind of paragraph, later Yangchen might look back on this as the greatest acting job she'd ever pulled off. Like this instantaneous thing of having to take in the ramifications of what that means, and then to react to it in the perfect way, which is to laugh and be like, I don't see how you, of all people, managed to anger the spirits so much from an ocean away, basically. Like, you're in the Water Tribe. Again, it's relatively close, but there's a whole ocean between you and the Earth Kingdom. You couldn't possibly have done this. So she plays it cool here, overall. But the point here is that, okay, it doesn't matter if that information that he got is correct or not. He's reacting to it as if it's correct. He's moving his troops into position. He knows this to be the truth. That, what do we trust more effectively? Your personal dynamic and how you view Faishan one-on-one, this very enigmatic character, or me getting direct reports of mass troop movements from the Earth Kingdom. And Yangchen can't really kind of defend that. And she realizes that what this means is that someone somewhere has basically leaked the core of more or less all the information about unanimity to the Earth King. And this is where, again, the Order of the White Lotus get brought up here, that, wait, I was the one who actually told them all of the information about unanimity. Should I have trusted Ayunarak to get her help by giving her all this information? Because in her mind, otherwise, there isn't really anyone else it could have been who leaked this information. So it kind of has to be the White Lotus. And it's noted here, it had to be kind of someone from their ranks. The secret society was supposed to be nationless, but it was made up of human beings with pasts and loyalties and ties of their own. Maybe the secrets had been sold for money. As far as she knew, the organization didn't pay its members anything. So heavy suspicions on multiple fronts here about the Order of the White Lotus not being in sort of full control of themselves, which I think sort of lines up with the presentation here a bit. So after this, Oyaluk is like, because he's mobilizing troops, I have to do the same. Like, the Water Tribe has to be ready if a conflict actually comes. It's the responsible thing. It's the thing I have to do as a leader. And she's kind of pointing out that, like, obviously, like, war is the worst possible thing that could ever happen here. We can't make this happen. Don't plunge the world into a senseless conflict. But he's just being realistic about it here, that, like, we're not air nomads. We can't just all fly away. We're on the ground here. We have to do what we have to do to survive. And he just has to do what he can. But of course, they kind of have a sense nothing's going to kick off until they have the big meeting in Taku coming up. So he's just aware that, like, I'm going to have to just prepare what I can ahead of time, but attend the meeting as if nothing happened. And Yangchen kind of just in her head is kind of noting, like, why is it always like this? Like, she gets approaching things in that way because she's kind of had to do it herself, but she just finds it, like, absolutely crazy. Like, you're racing towards a war you don't want, predicated on information you know to be false, while acting like nothing out of the ordinary is happening in the meantime. And he says it's the only rational course of action. But he also says, I know Firelord Gonryu must have rejected your proposal as well. I don't have any secret communication, but just because he thinks the same way I do. So that kind of implying that she has already, maybe a little bit before, had some sort of a meeting with Gonryu where she has effectively challenged him on the same thing she's challenging Oyaluk on. And she also hasn't gotten the right response here from him either. So that's the kind of whole idea here. So as the discussion dies down, she kind of gets rid of the tornado and stuff like that. And she just notes how, like, okay, is this how it ends? She just feels like there's been very few moments kind of in her life as the Avatar where she's just felt more kind of down, negative about the kind of after kind of result of everything. In fact, she mentions that the last time she kind of felt this way was actually after the old iron incident from the rift. But she goes to basically leave, but just as she's about to exit the door, he kind of is like, like he wants to say something else. So she turns around, and the book does a very good job at noting the idea of, she looks and sees this very kind of lonely man on his own, asking this question in this kind of very meek way, that he is ashamed about something here in relation to this question. And it's so interesting out of the blue, and it helps to characterize Oyaluk so much. And it's just, my cousin Akudan, is he well? And immediately you're like, wait, what's going on here? But then you remember, in the first book, this was alluded to. Now, it was alluded to in a very weird way. When Kavik first met Taigum and then later Akudan, like in the following chapter, he began to, he put out like a string of questions at the two of them. Kind of, because he was able, he's ultimately a decent judge of people and is able to, like, see what they're about. And one of the things he kind of says that, like, what is it? So you two are a former Northern Guard. Thin claws maybe, so far from home. You look like you can scrap. Then he says, for instance, unless you lost your limb in an accident, I'm thinking you might be related to royalty, an offshoot branch of the clan maybe. And then the narration notes, the Northern Chief's lineage had at least one notable ancestor born with one arm, a legendary whaler, in fact. And they never directly come back to this and like confirm this to be the case with Akudan, but here is obviously the direct confirmation here that Akudan is the cousin of the Northern Chief here, and we get the direct confirmation here, plus linking into like the Akudan's role in the Platinum Affair, where he and Taigum were quartermasters, and they were involved with transporting the funds that were meant to support General Nong, the actual Platinum, but they both got captured. And it was Yangchen, not their chief, who got them out. But now we know there's a family connection, and this is what he's about. This is why he's so ashamed in a way to finally ask about this. It's been years. Like, again, this is 8 years after the Platinum Affair, and only now is this topic being approached. And I find that to be very, very interesting. Now, I don't know, like, there's maybe an implication that, you know, she probably has told him about, like, her connection to Akudan before, but this feels like one of the first times he just has chosen to specifically ask about it, because they brought up the past so much in this chapter. So he says, he knows I couldn't get involved. Had our link been discovered, he would have become too valuable a hostage, he would have become leverage. He knows this, right? And Yangchen can see completely through this question. She knows that most of this comes down to, does he forgive me for making the right decision to basically do the right thing, basically for the nation as a leader, over family connections? And she just leaves saying, you did the rational thing, and walks out. And it's obviously a direct connection to the fact that he says his logic for why he's making the decision to not attempt to end the Platinum Affair and more just counter Faison, which could lead to war, is that is the rational choice as well. So I really like that, because it's the only scene in the book with Oiluk in it. But I really, really liked what they did throughout this chapter. I think there's a lot of depth in this that I really felt like Oiluk is a fascinating character kind of coming out of this. And the amount of depth that we got into just with him specifically, even just the references to the fact that like Oiluk has this kind of like dual view of Yangchen as just the young girl he met many times in the past versus the capable world leader that's here for business that comes to meet with him now. And then addressing the actual Platinum Affair itself all the more, addressing like two angles on the White Lotus kind of causing problems effectively in the world, them being at least partially or maybe mostly responsible for manipulating things to make the Platinum Affair actually happen. And it makes them kind of feeling like, you know, the arrogance in a way of the order in this era, that like we only choose to get involved in moments of generational importance. And it's like, well, do we want you to be involved when these are some of the decisions that you actually make? Not to mention, it seems like they can't keep control of leaks. If it is in fact true that is how Faison has come to realize that Yangchen has lied about the whole spiritual thing, and that it more than likely is a weapon. That's super, super interesting to me. And then, yeah, the revelation, the almost kind of random revelation here that you almost forget about from the first book with Akudan, is great to add a little bit of an emotional kind of moment right at the end here. So, wonderful chapter in my mind, just perfectly done throughout. Definitely one of the highlight chapters in the book. I do wish we had maybe got to see the scene with Gonryu, but I think they do a reasonable job at sort of establishing that it probably played out roughly the same way as this, just without the maybe more personal connection, without the Akudan thing going on there. So it made more sense to do it here, plus with why she's, I suppose, really in the north, which we'll learn about in the next chapter. It makes a lot more sense to do it here and just reference that she's already had a similar meeting with Gonryu. But I still wish we got to see and know what Ganryu specifically is like. But yeah, they're my thoughts on Chapter 3. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on this one. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.